Good morning. Now, the European Parliament, which is full of MEPs, has voted to call on the member states of the European Union to allow Ukraine to use long range cruise missiles to be fired into Russian territory. A vote was taken on a resolution which is non-binding, but it obviously sends a powerful signal that this is what they want to happen. The vote was taken yesterday, and they voted by 425 MEPs to 131 to call on European nations to allow this to happen. Now, of course, most European nations don't have the type of equipment needed for this to be done, but there are some, the more powerful ones, Germany, France, and Italy, of course, that do have long-range cruise missiles, their own version of British Storm Shadow weapons, which was in the news last weekend, because, of course, in the UK, we have this dreadful new Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, who is doing everything wrong culturally and economically in the UK. And abroad, he wants to escalate the war in Ukraine, or the war between Ukraine and Russia, by allowing British weapons to be fired into Russia, which would mean that the UK is an active combatant in a war with Russia. And we really do not want to go down that route. The British people do not want this. But obviously, you've got the Uniparty. It doesn't matter whether you have the fake Conservatives or the fake Labour Party, which has got nothing to do with the labouring man anymore in any shape or form whatsoever. They want to escalate war for the behest, for the benefit of the shareholders of warmongering corporations and certain groups that are invested in economically annexing Ukraine, and also have historical beef with Russia. There's a lot more to say about that, but I won't go into that in this video. My good friend who was killed in Ukraine, Gonzalo Lira, did a whole video about that aspect of the conflict as well. I'm sure you can imagine what he said. I'll put a link to that in the comment box below. But the thing here with the vote from the European Parliament is Germany has Taurus cruise missiles. Now, that so far they've said they're not going to deploy them. They're not going to give any permission for Ukraine to fire them. They don't even have them. They haven't even sent Taurus missiles to Ukraine. They've refused because even though the traffic light coalition, as it's called there, red, yellow, green. I mean, imagine that. I mean, for a government. But the traffic light coalition run by Olaf Scholz, even though they're utterly insane in most things, they realise that this is not a good idea to allow German cruise missiles to be fired into Russia. So they've refused to escalate even to that level of giving Ukraine their Taurus missiles. France has Scalp missiles, which are similar. They haven't given them to Ukraine. America has given the ATACMS weapon systems to Ukraine, but they haven't allowed them to be used to fire at Russia. And it doesn't look like they're going to. The sort of conversation, the back and forth, is whether to allow British weapons to be fired into Ukraine. But here we have European EU MEPs seemingly wanting to get in on the act and show their support for the Zelensky regime and prolonging and escalating this completely unnecessary war, which is no good for Ukraine. It's no good for the people of Ukraine. 500,000 young men have been killed. It's no good for Russia. 100,000 plus Russian young men have been killed as well. It's just dreadful slaughter. This is a brother war. Why? Why on earth is one Slavic people fighting another group of Slavic people? There could have been a peace deal. There was a peace deal in April 2022, and then Boris Johnson, acting for Victoria Nuland and others, went to Zelensky and convinced him to pull out of it and continue the war. And here we are, 2.5 years later, with so many hundreds of thousands of people dead, completely unnecessary, and all for the greed and the hatred of people in the deep state. So, yeah, this is just another ridiculous piece of posturing by MEPs. And if you look at the European Parliament, there are 720 MEPs there. Now, in the UK, there are four main parliamentary parties that have got, MPs from England, and there are regional parties also in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. But there's fake Conservative, Labour, Lib Dem, Green. In the European Parliament as well, you have similar blocks of MEPs, that are international within the European Union that roughly relate to those four parties we've got in the UK. You've got a centre-left bloc, a centre-right bloc, a centrist bloc, and the Greens. Actually, you've got two centre-right blocs, which are, there's not much difference between them. But, those five blocs together essentially are equivalent to the Uniparty, the Tory, Labour, Lib Dem, Green in the UK, the Republican Democrat in the USA. Obviously, in the USA, you've got MAGA, you've got Trump, who is taken over a lot of the Republican Party and is something different. So that's good. You've got that in the USA. But, you've got these rhinos, Republicans in name only, which are essentially Uniparty. And it doesn't matter whether someone's centre-left or centre-right or centre or green. They all do the same thing. They all act in the same way. They all push wokery. They're all pushing climate alarmism, and they're all pushing war and escalation of war, both in Ukraine and also in the Middle East as well. So you've got these 720 MEPs, 522 of them belong to this uniparty bloc. You've got some people who are sensible on the right, who are against war and who are against wokery. People like Viktor Orban's party, Fidesz in Hungary, and they've got a couple of blocks on their own on the real right, which often gets called the far right by the mainstream media, completely disparagingly and unfairly, because it's they just want what is common sense for the nations. And then you've got a far left bloc as well. Now, I completely disagree with the far left on almost everything except for one thing. And they are against war. They're against escalating war, both in Ukraine and in the Middle East and anywhere else. So on that issue, I would agree with them. And I'm very glad that they seem to have voted against this motion as well as the sensible right, the patriots, and the right of the sovereignty bloc as well, who actually are in tune and in line with the majority of people, in the citizens of the West, who don't want war and who don't want wokery and who don't want to dismantle our economy for the insanity of climate alarmism. So we need more of these people in our parliaments to stand against these ridiculous motions which are being put in by the Uniparty in order to try to say they want more war. I mean, why? It's just absolutely insane. But this was the vote that happened yesterday in the European Parliament. As I said, 425 against 131. So some people were absent and some people abstained. But yeah, out of the 720 MEPs, you've got there 554 who made a choice one way or the other. And the majority of them voted to fire weapons at Russia, fire European-made NATO weapons at Russia, which is insane. We should be de-escalating the situation, not calling for more escalation. Fortunately, this is a non-binding resolution, so it isn't going to they don't have the power in the European Parliament to make a decision to do this, but they're calling on the German government, the French government, the Italian government to give permission to use their weapons to fire at Russia. The other thing that was in that resolution also was a call for all EU countries to allocate 0.25% of their GDP for military support for Ukraine. Now, GDP is usually about three times as much as the actual government spending, because they don't take 100% of GDP for themselves. If they did, no one would have any money for themselves to buy anything. That would sort of indicate 100% tax. But they do take, a third to two-fifths of GDP in taxation for their own government spending. So when they say they want 0.25% of GDP to be given to Ukraine, what that actually means is about 0.75% of government spending, of the actual government budget. They're calling on that amount of money, which is going to be tens of billions of euros every year, to be given to the Zelensky regime in military aid to continue the war. Which is, again, utterly insane, because that money is the money that belongs to European taxpayers and should be spent on public services in the EU, same as in the UK. David Lammy, I can't believe is the UK Foreign Secretary, has pledged 3% not 3%, £3 billion a year for, in perpetuity. To Ukraine, because they think this is a war that's going to go on and on and on for years and years and maybe decades, because some people are insane enough to think if they keep this going for 10 years, 20 years, eventually they're going to defeat Russia. I mean, these people are utterly insane, and they're evil, because every year the war goes on, hundreds of thousands more young men die. They'll happily fight to the last Ukrainian man. And that's just devastating to the country. If they care about the country of Ukraine, they would end this war now and stop it. And we could. Trump has said if he gets elected, he will end the war in 24 hours. And for that reason, that reason alone is something to vote for him for in America. I don't agree with everything in his platform, but he's pretty good. He's good on de-escalating war in Ukraine. He's good on fighting wokery and re-establishing traditional family values, and he's good at saying this climate alarmism is absolute nonsense. We got to drill, baby, drill, use oil, use gas to reignite the American economy, which is good for American people over there in the USA. So there's a lot of good things in his platform for president in terms of policy, whereas Harris has got nothing in terms of policy which is good whatsoever. She will continue with war. She will bring in, the degeneracy of cultural Marxism in a way that has never been done before, and will destroy the economy by destroying the carbon-based energy infrastructure, which they've got in the USA. So, I mean, that's an aside. But the thing is here, this is a crazy resolution by people who, some of them may think that they're doing the right thing, but really they're responsible. These MEPs, they need to have they can't just have the excuse, oh, someone told me to vote this way, therefore I did it because, and I didn't think about it. They've got to look into everything that they vote into and realize what they've done is voted for more death, more debt, more destruction, more war, and they have done evil by voting this resolution through. Let's hope that the countries that are in the EU don't act on it, and that common sense will prevail very soon when Trump is elected president in the USA, and all these resolutions and moves to try and escalate, to fire weapons into Russia will just fall away as this war comes to a close and we stop more people from being slaughtered. Thanks for listening, everybody. God bless you all.